Happy Friday, everyone. Happy Friday. So good to see each of you. We've been expecting you, as we always do every Friday around this time. And we don't take it lightly that you have decided to join us for this learning experience. We invite you to get settled in. Certainly take to the chat. Let us know where you're joining the conversation from. It's always a treat for us to see where people are joining the conversation from. If you also feel inclined, certainly share other information about yourself, maybe even including your LinkedIn information. That is your way of letting us know that you desire to be connected to this community, even beyond this hour of time. And we're always grateful for those wonderful connections. This is Intentional Conversations VodCast, and I am Dr. Nika White, your host and the founder and lead principal consultant for NWC. This is a time where we intersect conversations regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and we intersect that with leadership and business. So we hope that you are ready for a great conversation today, that you're ready to engage with us. I'll let you know that cameras are always encouraged, but they're certainly not required, but we do love seeing smiling faces. However, if you are here just in an auditory capacity and as an observer, then we certainly welcome you nonetheless as well. We are live today on LinkedIn, so I do want to acknowledge a LinkedIn audience that may be with us today. We are watching the comments there, bringing some of your sentiments, expressions, and thoughts and questions into today's conversation. I want to leverage the chat today to make sure we are really optimizing community. So if I say something or one of our guest co-hosts says something today that really resonates with you, then take to the chat or the comments if you're joining by LinkedIn and let us know how that's resonating with you. What are your reflections and thoughts about it? If there's a resource that comes to mind that's been of value to you and you believe it will be of value to this broader podcast community, then we encourage you to share it into the chat. It's our way of learning with and from each other. I do like to also highlight that we have closed caption available for those who may benefit from that. It's our way of really showing up for the disability inclusion efforts that we really do try to practice very diligently here at NWC. So sit back and welcome to Intentional Conversations VodCast. Once again, if you're just joining us and getting settled in, I'm Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and this is Intentional Conversations VodCast. We are here every Friday intersecting conversations of DEI with leadership and business. I often like to continue to share with this community that for those of you who can't catch us live, you always can do the replay. But if you are someone who really likes getting your content in a podcast capacity, we do have the Intentional Conversations podcast, which is where we have lifted the audio from our podcast experience to make it available wherever you like to get your podcasts. I like to take an opportunity to always acknowledge some of the great co-hosts we have coming up so that you can plan accordingly to mark your calendars and be among our participant list so that you can hear the great input, feedback, and expertise that the wonderful co-hosts that we are able to bring on are able to share. So on October the 7th, we're going to be kicking the month off with Intentional Conversations with Lizette Martinez, and we're going to be discussing the benefits of using minority-owned businesses as suppliers and creating proactive business programs to encourage supplier diversity. That's a topic we have not spent a lot of time on in our podcast, and I'm a big fan of making sure we can amplify women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and so I really look forward to Lizette joining us the first Friday in October. If you know of a co-host that you believe would add great value to our conversations, we encourage you to let us know about those individuals. Many of those who have come on to join us over the past couple years has been because they have come to us by way of a referral or recommendation from members of this community. So we're now booking guest co-hosts for Q1 of 2023. We're booked out through this year. And if you want to share a recommendation, please send that to my colleague, Amora Carter. And you can send that to her at amora@nikawhite.com. Now, I am so excited to formally introduce not one, but two guest co-hosts today. One is returning to the IC podcast, and this time she has returned with a friend. And I know that today's conversation is going to be so rich. So for those of you who are familiar with how we do things here at the IC podcast, I always like to take an opportunity to provide a formal introduction, reading the bios, the accolades, the credentials of our guest co-hosts so that you can be well informed about how in which they show up to this space and what qualifies them to be able to speak on topics relevant to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm going to do the same today for our two guest co-hosts. I will start first with Anu Mandapati. And Anu is an award-winning global diversity, equity, and inclusion and leadership development thought leader. She was selected as one of top 100 DEI leaders of 2021 by Mogul, serves as the head of DEI at Magic Leap and DEI Coaching Center faculty for the Forum on Workplace Inclusion, very familiar with that, and has previously served as VP, head of DEI at Talking Talent and US DEI coaching leader at PwC. Anu is also an ICF professional certified coach, PCC, certified team performance coach, CTPC, and national board certified health and wellness coach, NBC/HWC, giving you all the acronyms for these things that we're pointing out to you about Anu's background. Anu works at the intersection of leadership, relationships, well-being, and inclusion to coach executives and teams to navigate change, work across difference, amplify their impact, and shape a better future. She has also partnered with various global Fortune 500 organizations to create their multi-year enterprise-wide DEI strategy. Anu believes that what we create in the workplace has the power to transform people's lives and society. As leaders, we can make an individual, organizational, and societal impact. Anu has a passion for writing about leadership and organizational development and is a contributing author of two books, The Female CEO and A View from the Top: Exceptional Leadership Strategies for Women. Her leadership tips, tools, and strategies have been featured in various publications, including Forbes, Fortune, HR Daily Advisor, Inc., Money, and Yahoo. Our next guest co-host today that I would like to provide an introduction for is Elonda B. Johnson, who is a certified executive coach, NBHWC certified health and wellness coach, a team coach, global human resources HR leader, diversity strategist, entrepreneur, and dynamic speaker. She has committed her career to inspiring leaders to embrace their strengths and unique gifts while honoring their values, gaining influence, and creating impact within their organizations, businesses, and communities. With over 16 years of experience working in diverse roles in tech, professional services, and professional sports, Elonda is a sought-after and credentialed coach and an expert consultant and facilitator on topics such as coaching for change, leading with impact, DEI, well-being, and a range of assessments, including HBDI and the Leadership Circle Profile. Elonda helps clients focus on their wide range of leadership capabilities with clarity and intention, one of my favorite words. Elonda resides in the Dallas, Texas area with her entrepreneur husband and 3 talented children. When not coaching, she enjoys traveling, quality time with friends and family, and pursuing real estate apps for inspiration. So VodCast community, you know what we do here. We always take a moment, either through the emojis, through words of expression in the chat, to show appreciation to our guest co-host. So today is going to be no different. I will ask that you please welcome them in your own way as I take to spotlighting them to bring them into the conversation. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Anu and Elonda. We're so glad to see you here today. I want to give you a chance to first and foremost greet this audience in your own way. But I'll tell you, one of the things that we do here at NWC in our podcast is you can't repeat something that's already in your bio. We've already read all of that. What we're looking for now is something that maybe helps us to connect with you on a different level. Sometimes our guest co-hosts will share maybe intersecting identities that helps them to really show up the way that they do to this conversation, to this work. So whatever it is, what do we not know about you? We hope that you will feel inclined to share that with us. And so Anu, we'll start with you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I will say that for me, the reason this work is very personal to me. And, for many, many reasons. And most people don't know that I actually was born in India. And I moved here when I was around 5, 6 years of age. And a big part of why I do this work is I never felt like I fit in, because people had shared with me that I wasn't Indian enough, or people had shared that I wasn't American enough. And to me, as a kid, I didn't really know what to do with, how to fit in, and how do you create belonging for yourself as well as for other people. And so that to me has driven everything that I've done. So whether it's in workplaces, whether it's in communities, whether, friends, family, I always try to create spaces where people feel like they belong. And then a personal fun fact, I live in Austin, Texas, and I eat lots of Tex-Mex. So.
Fantastic. One of our colleagues who's on today, she's in Dallas, Texas as well. And so I'm sure that probably resonated with her. Great. Elonda, your turn. We'd love to hear from you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So where do I begin? I am Anu's soul sister. We are kindred spirits in this work. I am excited to be here with you all, and just thank you for the invitation to both Nika and Anu. Let's see, what else do you need to know about me? I am divine light.
Oh.
I show up in an authentic way in every interaction that I have. I will repeat the word intention, because that is my word. That was in my bio. I am a light bringer and a hope seeker. I hold that space for every leader that I encounter, in a way that helps them to live into their best selves and their divine purpose.
I'm pausing here because I just want us all to take that in, to take your words in. You are divine light. That I have chills. I literally have chill bumps right now. That is so powerful, so powerful. And I can't wait for us to just, delve right into some of the topics, because I know that it's going to fill us all at the end of this week, right? Some of us may be in geographies where we are concerned about the weather and the storm and the hurricanes. And so there's a lot that we all could be holding as we engage in today's conversation. But just hearing you say, I am divine light, it puts such a huge calm over me. So I am ready. I want to start because some of our audience members could be thinking, well, why do you have two guest hosts today? What do they have in common? And why are they both in this particular session together? And so I want to start there. So how did you both meet, and what brought you to the DEI space? And I'll let you decide who should go first.
We can both jump in. So we actually worked together quite a number of years ago, and we talk on a weekly basis. Elonda is part
sometimes daily.
Sometimes daily. So she is one of my thought partners. Whenever we need to navigate situations, we bounce ideas off of each other, and it's so amazing to have such a supportive group in life. And she's definitely in this nice little, we call each other soul sisters, and so she's definitely in my soul sister circle.
I love that. Anything you'd like to add, Elonda, to that?
Well, I'll say we met doing as leadership coaches, and we both have just a natural affinity for DEI and B work. Anu shared a little bit about her story and what brought her to this work. For me, I identify as a African American or Black woman, and I've been raised in environments where sometimes I may have been the only one or part of the minority. And for me, it's always been important to create spaces where, despite how you identify, you feel included in a sense of belonging and connection. And so both of us in our former work really leaned into that. And that's where the relationship really started, us both having a passion for the work and finding that connectivity. And then the relationship blossomed from there.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And so you both actually did work together at PwC. Mm-hmm. And for a little fun fact for the benefit of this audience is that we have had the pleasure of having a part of the NWC team, Cosette Strong, who serves as one of our senior directors of DEI strategy and design. And it is because, Anu, of the connection that you made for the two of us that Cosette's now a part of the NWC team. And so as we were preparing for today, there have been numerous occasions where Cosette has just lit up with, great excitement around the fact that we were going to be able to have you both on today. So I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity just to add to the spotlight Cosette, to allow her a moment just to be able to say hello and just to greet the two of you. And I'm sure she's probably going to have lots of other things to share throughout our conversation today. So Cosette, the floor is yours.
Hi, Anu. Hi, Elonda. I am so happy that you are here. Just a little fun fact about, our PWC connection. When I first met Anu, she and I just bonded over so much. I remember seeing her do some group coaching, and I just thought, I just want to know her. I just want to know her. And over the years, she has been my soul sister, and just encouraging me, supporting me, just helping me live my life to the best potential. And I feel like she and Elonda and I have so much in common. And so I am excited that they are here, that we can share them with this amazing IC VodCast community. So welcome. Can't wait to hear the rest.
Awesome. Thank you so very much, Cosette. So I think probably many of us are sitting back thinking, how do I get to be a soul sister? I'm kind of liking the feel of this. And so anyway, but nonetheless, thank you both again for being here. I want to shift and I want to talk about how organizations are really focused on recruitment and retention right now, right? And so how does developing leaders in a more inclusive and equitable way support retention? That seems like something that you both are closely connected with. And so, Elonda, we'll start with you, and then Anu, we'd love for you to also chime in.
Sure. So when we think about retention in general, I think we have to go to the reason why people choose to stay or go. And I always encourage leaders and clients that I'm working with to really think about their why. Like what has drawn you to a particular place? Why do you continue to stay? Like, what's the elevator pitch for that position that you're holding? And what we experience is that when that starts to shift, and it's not as positive, is when people start thinking about transitioning. And particularly for people of color that identify as a minority, one of the number one things that comes up is not having that sense of belonging and inclusion, or feeling like what was communicated coming in terms of the commitment to DEI&B differs from what they're actually experiencing. And so I really think that goes to like how we're developing and coaching and mentoring leaders and people that are in decision-making positions in those organizations, because you have the power to impact the experience of those individuals. So I think that's why it's critical to retention, because basically, to summarize that, like, we don't want to just be a poster, right? Of drawing in talent. We actually want to make sure that there's an environment where people feel like they can thrive and really grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I want to add to that is, you look at so many organizations, especially in these last 2 to 3 years, heavy focus has been on representation. So bringing in as many diverse individuals as possible. And we're not spending enough time focusing on the inclusion piece of it. And what happens when we do that, people are either disengaged or they actually leave. And these stats are a little bit old, but in 2015, Intel spent a significant number of resources to diversify their employee base. So they brought in 212 Black professionals. And in 1 year, they lost 202. And this is not unique to Intel. It happens in so many places, because we're not spending enough time focusing on what is that culture where we're inclusive. People experience that sense of belonging at the team level as well as the organizational level. So for leaders, what are they doing, especially at that team level? What are they doing, one-on-one, to really make sure that this person feels included, part of the team, part of the organization? And it's, especially in the last 2 years, we've seen it too. Our personal lives intersect with our professional lives. So just showing that care and showing that connection, that's going to make the difference for retention. And it's a non-negotiable skill for leaders to have at this point. It's not an option. They've got to be focused on it.
Absolutely. It truly resonates with me, the need for there to be a parallel path. I mean, yes, we certainly want to make sure that we are amplifying the need for good representation, which means we have to have that strategic recruiting strategy to get that representation. But there's going to be a revolving door if we also aren't aligned with what are those strategies that's going to help us to retain that talent. You know, people say all the time that I embrace diversity, I welcome diversity, and I think that they're well intended. But the bottom line is that we don't have to do anything really to create diversity. It's already here and happening. It's the inclusion part, which is what you're speaking to, Anu, that's so important and requires us being calculated, calibrated, action-oriented, strategic, right? To bring that full circle. And then Elonda, you mentioned the word belonging, which we know is so important to this broad conversation. This podcast community has heard me share so many times that it is hard for any person, regardless of their background and their demographics, any person to show up at their best in any environment if they always are questioning whether or not they belong, right? Do I belong here? Am I seen? Am I valued? Am I heard? Do I have full opportunity for success? So the list goes on and on. So I appreciate you providing that commentary. What are some of the biases that are at play when developing leaders? And specifically when you think about leadership executive coaching engagements, what are some biases that may show forth that could allow the output to not be as effective? I know both of you are in that coaching space, and so share a little bit of your thoughts in that regard.
I'd say that I always ask leaders to think about the picture that they have of what does a leader look like? And many times you look at the senior most roles in most organizations in the US, and that's of white men. So sometimes these leadership traits are very masculine in nature too. And even just, who are we seeing in these roles? And then when we actually have the decision-making power, whether it's hiring or promotion, are we bringing in more of the same? People who think alike, speak alike, act alike, etc. So a lot of the biases that we see, I mean, and there's so many pieces of this, I feel like we could talk about this for several hours. But one I would just say is, right now, especially in hybrid and remote cultures, I'm going to say proximity bias. So is it the people that you're interacting with more one-on-one? And even, or are you actually taking the time to really develop everybody that's on your team? And even taking a step back from that, I think it's exposure. It's connecting with people and really embracing different ideas of what leadership could look like. Because if we're actually thinking about there's one idea of a leader and we put this person up top and then you hire similar people, it's going to be one person and honestly a whole bunch of mini me's, right? That's not diversity. That's not innovation. That's not inclusion. And so, and I think that's the challenge that I always ask leaders, when you think about traits, what does that actually mean? So for example, a client about a couple of years ago that I had, and this still stands out to me, he's a senior leader and he wanted his leader to be more confident. And I always ask, well, what does that look like to you? And he talked about this person's appearance, which to me is not the definition of that I would think of for confidence. And so it's really to challenge, what do you envision and how are you actually bringing more people to the table?
Yeah, I know that is so good. So much to unpack there. And Elonda, you're shaking your head. So I know that you're definitely aligned with what Anu is sharing. A couple thoughts, and then I would love for you to express what's coming up for you. You talked about this sea of sameness, that those are my words, not yours, but you were really just getting to the point of how we tend to, and this is human nature, we gravitate to people who are like us. And that's where the conversation of fit versus add, right? Cultural fit versus add needs to be really brought to the fore so that people aren't missing the opportunity to add additional talent based upon the difference that may be from the present group that's a part of that organization. I also think that it's important for us to refute this idea of conformity and groupthink. When everybody's thinking alike, no one's really thinking. And that is in essence what the output of conformity. We're just conforming to the mainstream dominant culture instead of bringing our authentic selves to that conversation. And that's where we really do defeat the whole value and strength of diversity, right? And so I appreciate the emphasis there. Elonda, I want to get your thoughts here.
In general, I was just reflecting on how the workplace is evolving. When we think about, leaders of kind of yesteryear, It tended to fit a certain profile, a certain age, a certain gender, a certain race and ethnicity. And as we really look at just the graying of like the leadership space in the workforce, there's creating space for a different type of leader. And that comes in different shapes and forms as well. But I think about some of the millennials and zennials that are really redefining what leadership looks like as they're kicking off their own companies, and really leading with their voices in a way that many of us just aren't accustomed to, and the impact that that's really having on leadership by definition. I think we're seeing more authentic leaders. We're seeing people lean into situational leadership more than we ever have, which really calls for different types of thinking and embracing the ideas and perspectives of others as we navigate through really just a shifting work environment.
No, absolutely. I love what you said when you mentioned creating space for a different type of leader. It is time for us to start reimagining how we've always viewed a quote unquote leader, and creating and making that space. I think that's something that's really important from a DEI practitioner perspective, is how in which we are amplifying the leadership aspect of this work, right? We've been talking a lot at NWC about the need for us to be intentional to not always just gravitate towards the language of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, but let's lead with now leadership, because that's what this is. It's at the core of it. And I believe that there's probably a greater appetite for that type of conversation these days. And so I appreciate the affirmation that this conversation is bringing to some of our thinking that's happening within NWC. So I want to shift a little bit, and I want to talk about sponsorship versus training. So why should leaders choose sponsorship over training? Anya, would you like to lead on that?
Sure. So many years ago, I was asked to consult with an organization where there was just a stopping point for women leaders. They made it to a certain level, and then we didn't see a lot of representation at higher levels. And what does every organization do in this situation to diversify their leadership pipeline is to stick everyone in a leadership development program. So, and we both, we come from a leadership development background. So I think that these experiences are beneficial for everyone. But if you really want to make a shift, there's three things that I would always focus on. So leadership development, yes, but if you only do that, it's a Band-Aid. It's and Band-Aids, if something is a significant problem and it's hemorrhaging, you don't put a Band-Aid on it. So the other two pieces are one, is going to be sponsorship. So it's really about increasing visibility, building those relationships, helping people to actually for stepping in and really advocating for other people. So these are individuals whose voice might not be in the room at the right time with the right people. So that's what we're doing sponsorship wise. But there's a third component too. And that third component is, how do you have the people who have these decision-making skills or decision-making powers for promotions or assigning people to these stretch assignments? How are we disrupting their biases? And so when you stick all three of those together, that's the golden trifecta for me. And if you just do pieces of it, especially just the first one, which is a leadership development training, you're not going to see the impact that you want. You're not going to see that shift.
That's really good. That's really good. And sometimes, people will mistake or, use interchangeably sponsorships with mentorship. So while they're both are really critical aspects of development and growth, there's a huge distinction. And so, Elonda, do you want to kind of share a little bit about the distinction points there between sponsorship and mentorship?
Sure. So with sponsorship, really, there's a level of accountability and responsibility that you carry that's not necessarily present with mentorship. Mentorship tends to be a two-way street.
Yeah.
And sponsorship or let's take a level above, advocacy has the power to really change the trajectory and the experience for that person that you're sponsoring or advocating for.
No, that's key. The optimum word that you used was accountability, and that is the key separator. I often say that where you track and measure, things get done. Where you hold people accountable, they deliver. But if without that accountability piece, that's when it just becomes kind of a wish or a desire, but it definitely doesn't always lead to the outcomes that we're seeking. So I appreciate that distinction. Lots of great stuff happening into the chat. And so keep that engagement going. So how can we shift company culture while redefining skills and what defines someone as a leader worth developing? So how can we shift company culture while redefining skills and what defines someone as a leader worth developing? Are leaders made? Are they born? We hear all these conversations so often, right? What
Leaders are
defines someone as a
developed.
leader? Yeah.
Yeah, leaders are developed and cultivated over
Yeah.
time. It's
So
an
would you say that
evolution.
anyone can be in that stead and that role and that title?
I believe so. I believe we all have the capacity. We don't all cultivate it.
So good. Yeah. I totally agree
Yeah.
with that.
And
Yeah.
that resonates with me personally, just from my
Yeah.
personal experience of I've been on my own journey. And if you could see my whiteboard behind me, it has the I'm divine light, but it also says I do not shrink, nor do I dim my light.
Oh, I love that.
So, and Anu and I talk about this a lot. We're each other's cheerleaders. And when our confidence is lacking or we're operating from a place of fear, like we pull each other forward. And to me, that's cultivating like your inner leadership. It's a trait that I think you have to master or to work on first internally before you can then show up in a leadership capacity externally. So,
Yeah.
so said differently, if you're not leading self, it's hard to lead others.
Oh, of course. You're right. That self-awareness, self-management is where it starts. Anu, I want to hear from you on this same question.
Yeah, it's interesting when you first put that question out there about leaders and who can be a leader. I think sometimes people actually gatekeep and say, oh, here's what the vision of a leader is. So, I'm going to focus on person A and B, but not person C. We all have leadership capacity. We can lead at home. We can, lead with our family, our community, at work. It's not about the title. And so it's really, I really think that sometimes it's actually someone just completely believing in you. And once they have that, then they can say, oh, you know what, I really can do this. There was a woman several years ago who there was a vacancy in on her team. So she stepped up as a interim senior director on her team. Then the position actually opened up so she could apply for it. She said, well, I don't know if I can do it. And I said, but you've been doing this for 6 months. And having that conversation, having someone truly say, I believe in you and I see that in you, that is what she needed to hear to make that shift, even though she was literally doing this job for 6 months already.
Yeah.
So.
And that's influence. I think that's what I love about leadership in general. It's about influence. And oftentimes when I express that, being inclusion minded, really fostering that sense of belonging and really being focused with an equity lens, that's all like competencies of leadership. And so when we think about it in that regard, it's not leadership always by title or positionality, it is by influence. And where I think that becomes really relevant to all of us who are really wanting to operate in this space at a high level, or even just to be effective allies, a title that is earned by those in which we're allying for, is that we don't have to have a title of chief diversity officer, manager, director, or HR professional, or coach. We can literally be in any type of role and position and still be able to foster positivity and traction and momentum within this work, right? And so I think that's so important. And I just wanted to bring that to the conversation because so often people will say, well, I can't impact that. I believe in it. I have values, my personal values around DEI, but I can't really impact that because I'm not in this position. I'm not in leadership. I'm not a part of the C-suite. And that's not true. So I so love that. I want to talk about coaching now. And so I want to understand from your vantage point, the benefits of coaching. because this has really increased, I would say probably over the last, 5 or so years in terms of how organizations are viewing coaching and bringing coaching opportunities into their organization as part of that professional development. But outside of that, why should DEI practitioners focus on coaching over training? What's the difference there, and how can we gain maybe greater traction, if you think that we can, by a coaching mentality versus a training? Who wants to
I'll
take
take
that
it.
one?
I'll take it. Well, I think at the root of coaching is sustained behavior change. I think that's the power behind it. And because as coaches, we're guides, we're walking alongside you on your journey to doing your own work. Training, we're giving you information, and then you leave and you choose what you do with it, but there's no accountability in it. And there's that word again, there's accountability.
There's that
in
word again.
coaching.
Yeah. The other word you mentioned, Elonda, was sustained.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's part of what we're trying to create, is that transformative change that's going to remain even beyond that moment of time of receiving that information. It's, I certainly align with your philosophy around the sustained behavior change. One of the things that we've intentionally tried to do at NWC is shift our language. We really don't like to use the word training, because it sounds like a destination, right? We more often use language like learning and development experiences, and there could be a whole strategy of different modalities that are being leveraged to help people really to learn what they need to learn, so that ultimately they can apply it as practice and it becomes second nature. So your thoughts, Anu, on coaching versus training and really the benefits of it?
It's exactly what was just discussed, right? I really think it's sustained behavior change, it's personalization. There's quite a bit of information that's out there. Then how do we actually take the time to apply it to me? What are my strengths? What are my challenges? And then what's the support that I need? So really being, you're walking away with a very clear action plan and putting things into practice. And one thing that I always like to emphasize is, especially in the DEI space, it is not about perfection. Perfection causes stress and anxiety. It's about practice. Practice is what creates progress. So specific
Yes.
to DEI, I think coaching is tremendous and wonderful, and I think it's just been so impactful, because what we're doing is we're creating psychologically safe spaces. And I've had many clients over the years, approach me with this kind of frenzied energy when it comes to DEI of, kind of just this, I'm scared that I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm scared that I'm going to do the wrong thing. And so creating that or providing that psychologically safe space in coaching is that I'm not going to judge you. You're here to share, and we can talk about things in such an open way, where I've had people share with me that, I haven't had a lot of exposure to this specific group, and they don't have an opportunity to share that anywhere else. And so there's questions that they might have of specific experiences. And so when they're able to share that within that psychologically safe space and not be judged, then they can actually come up with what's the action plan, after that, of what I can do to learn and to grow. And I'll also say that many organizations are really focusing on diversifying their leadership pipeline. And so, like what we talked about before, so, a lot of people are going into leadership development experiences, and many of these are focused on women and what many organizations are going to say ethnically diverse professionals. Well, what does that mean? So it's basically everyone but white men, because those are individuals who are overrepresented. And so I've actually provided psychologically safe spaces through coaching for white men to come in and say, well, wait a second, does this mean that I'm being left out? Does this mean that, the organization doesn't care about me? And I'd much rather help them have that conversation in those coaching sessions with me, because if they're having it with themselves, it's not leading to a great place. If they're having it with a peer who's in a similar situation, that's not really helping either. So when they're able to have these conversations and just name it, right? Name what the challenge is, and they're actually able to move through that too. So when we're able to have these conversations, what happens is, with these specific situations I'm thinking of is, okay, well, now I understand the why. Now I understand, why as an organization we're doing this. And now I'm understanding my role and how can I step up and be an ally. And that, I think, coaching can really drive DEI impact forward much faster and in a much more impactful way. And I think that's why we've got to really make sure that coaching is a part of this.
I so love everything that you just shared. And the one thing that really stood out to me is the personalization. You're right. I mean, we can, convene a group of people all day long, and we can kind of talk at them with, several different information that may help, build up their knowledge. But until we really can tailor fit kind of a strategy and a plan for development that is useful to the person based upon where they are, I think that's where the difference comes in at. The reality is that we all are entering these conversations at different places within our own learning journey, right? We have different mental models that we are holding, and there's not really a one size fits all approach. And I do want to amplify something that's in the chat that Alfred Ramirez shared. And he's mentioning maybe it's not an either or when it comes to coaching, training, mentoring, sponsorship. It's really a combination of all of the above. And I do believe that. And so I think that we have to get out of this mentality of there being kind of this one approach that's now going to solve all of the things for all the people, because no such thing really exists. So we're going to be shifting momentarily to take questions and comments from those who are gathered here today. And you have a couple ways in which you can do that. One of which is continue to go to the chat. If you have a question, you can certainly send that into the chat, and we will make sure that we present the question to our guest co-host. Or we also love to spotlight individuals who are willing to unmute themselves and to contribute their question or comments live. And so we do welcome that as well. We ask that you identify yourself and your desire to do so by just raising your hand, and that lets me know that you are willing to be spotlighted. And so we'll transition there in just a moment. I'll go to one other question while maybe others are thinking about perhaps what they'd like to contribute. I want to move to talking about allies. And so how can allies show up in really impactful ways? What does that look like? Who would like to start with that one? I'll let you all decide.
Do you want to go for it?
Go ahead, Anu.
Well, Nika, I think you shared a very clear distinction. This is not something that is a chosen title. It is something that's earned. And there's so many different behaviors that people can engage in. And I think what's most relevant when we talk about personalization is actually is having a conversation of what is it that you need, and then me stepping up in that way. So taking it even further, because I think people, think of allyship in a little bit more of a general way. And so for us to have even more impact, I think it's actually looking at, specific situations. So if I'm in an, if I'm in a team meeting and I keep getting, talked over, then that would be a great allyship behavior of just pointing that out. But I think, and we hear those types of examples all the time, but my challenge recommendation to people is, let's actually dig in a little bit deeper and find out for each individual, well, what does that actually look like as I'm partnering with them? How can I be a better ally to them, versus just here's a list of behaviors and here's my checklist of what to do.
Elonda, anything you'd like to add to that?
I just second that and say that it's really about the personalization. Like, allyship is not a badge that you get for reading a book. It's really about the one-on-one interactions and the choice that you make in those moments to show up in a way that is supportive of the individual or individuals. And so I really think that it's honestly more of a description or a label that the person on the receiving end should bestow upon you, versus you just declaring yourself an ally.
Absolutely. And yeah, go for it.
When I think of that, I think about the question of whose needs are you centering? So if you're centering your own needs, that's not allyship.
Not allyship. Yeah.
That is
That's
allyship.
good. Really
Powerful.
good litmus test. Y'all remember that. Whose needs are you centering? Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And it is about, at bare minimum, action, not just, your thoughts and your sentiments, right? I mean, that carries some weight, but what are you doing from an action-oriented perspective to really help advance the needs of those who are part of these marginalized communities? And so I appreciate that distinction. So I'm seeing a couple hands up, and also some items that are in the chat that I want to make sure we can bring to the conversation. Let's first start with Bianca. Bianca, I am going to ask that you please unmute yourself, and we'd love to get you into the conversation.
Hi, good morning. I am grateful to be in this space. My name is Bianca. My pronouns are she, her, aya. I'm the director of health equity and have a question around, I find in the equity space that a lot of us are women of color, and yet senior leadership tends to be white. And I find very often that white senior leadership seems to try to pit the women of color in DEI against each other when it comes to funding, when it comes to strategic priority. And so I'm wondering, how do you approach white leadership saying like, equity is important, you have a lot of people of color underneath you that are trying to get this work going, but it seems like you are kind of making us almost, it's like an inside fight where there's supposed to be solidarity amongst people of color, but there can't be because we're all fighting over resources that are all coming from a white identified senior leader.
Great question. Thanks for being here, Bianca.
Yeah, thank you. That's such a great question, and thank you for asking it. And I would actually say, so when we're noticing these things, it's actually bringing it up to people's attention. And the way that we do that too is, how do we invite people into the conversation? And actually have a Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote up on my wall. It's fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. So how can we have this conversation, invite people into this journey, have them join us? And so it's not a us versus them, it's a we. We're all in this together.
I agree with that. And, I think, Bianca, it's important that you not depend on the guidance of the leadership to come together and form the community amongst you and your colleagues. I think that's where I would honestly start. Is calling attention to like this, I'm feeling this. Are you feeling it as well? Like, how are you experiencing this? And how do we want to address it with leadership collectively? So you're presenting more of a unified front. So there's less opportunity for that division if you all have done your work and you've aligned prior to, moving forward with leadership.
Thank you. I appreciate the thoughtfulness of your answers.
Thanks so much, Bianca. So again, more hands are going up. I'm going to now spotlight Lakeisha. Lakeisha, thanks so much for being here. Feel free to share your question, comments.
Hi, everyone. My name is actually Lakeisha.
Lakeisha, thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. So, hi, Elonda.
Hi.
So, Elonda, you made a comment that the workplace is evolving and more people are looking for ways to identify mentors, sponsors, et cetera. And I often hear when the question is asked, should someone ask someone to be a sponsor? I hear differing opinions about that question. For me, I usually advise people to, instead of asking someone to be your sponsor, to turn it around and more ask them about, what do I need to do that will help you understand more about what I do, so that if they're in rooms and my name happens to come up, they're able to speak to who I am and what I do and what my passions are. Can some of you share your thoughts on, should someone ask someone to be their sponsor? Because it's a different school of thought based on who you ask.
So I think it's a mixture of both. I think it depends on the relationship and the dynamic at play. Part of the nuance to the way you described is that you are, if you're coming to them, like you're showing them, you're demonstrating that you're worthy almost. And I'm going to change that word, that you are prepared to receive their sponsorship, because you're showing them like what you can do, and then organically they're buying in and they're wanting to advocate and sponsor you, right? Sometimes people are just, they don't see it. They just they think that you are just a top performer and they really appreciate the work that you do, and you have to go that extra mile and call attention to, like, this is where I'm trying to go and I need your support in getting there. So I think it's we can't be afraid to speak up and advocate for ourselves when they're not quite picking up on what we're giving off. And at the same time, I think we have to be prepared, and we have to be demonstrating, that we are ready for what we're asking for.
Such a great question, Lakeisha. One of the things that was coming up for me as you were presenting your question, and Elonda was presenting her points, I believe that there is a level of responsibility at the organization's level to incorporate a process by which being engaged in a sponsorship relationship is easy, right? Especially if you are a large organization with a large population of people that you're looking to retain, who are often challenged because they're the one and onlys, and they are feeling this sense of isolation. Because it's not always easy. Let's just face it. It's not always easy to ask someone to be a mentor. And even it's harder, I believe, to ask someone to be your sponsor. So I believe that if organizational leaders can build that into their infrastructure, it takes away some of the angst that people can have by saying, hey, will you put me on to someone so that I can have this upward mobility opportunities, right? So anyway, I just wanted to add that thought to it.
And
thanks so much. Yeah.
And Nika, as you were sharing, I was reflecting on just experience that I've had at a prior organization where oftentimes it's a peer of the sponsor that is putting someone on that person's radar and saying, I need you to sponsor this person. Like, I'm too close and I need you to step in. And also the moment I had is that often it's white males.
Yeah.
And so it poses a different question of how do women and racial and ethnic minorities secure sponsorship.
Oh, that's so good. Elonda, I cannot tell you how many times I have had white male CEOs, C-suite leaders to reach out to say, Dr. White, I want to connect you with someone. This person has great potential, and I just believe that you can help them. And once I start to probe and dig deep, it's always a person of color, most often another woman of color. And what they're saying to me is that as a white man, I don't think that I am equipped to help mentor and sponsor them. And that's a problem. That's a problem. And so I love the fact that there are individuals like the two of you who have strategies to really help prepare white male colleagues to be equipped to help provide that level of mentorship and sponsorship, because honestly, that's where a lot of the influence lies. That's where a lot of the power lies. And so we can't negate what that experience could bring to the output of someone's upward mobility potential, So anyway, Lakeisha, thank you so very much for being here today, for sharing your message. Yeah, go for it.
So I'm just thinking of it's being really intentional, being really, I guess, clear actually of what it is that you want. Because when we're having a conversation with someone, if they just know that we do a great job or that, maybe we'd like to move up, that's not, for me, that's not clear enough. And so it's really about what is it that I need? And then what are your thoughts? Can you give me some advice, right? So having that conversation, not just the ask of, I want you to help me become CEO, right? But it's here's my, here's what I'm working on, and what is your advice? And what are some ways that you think, that I can work on ABC? You're building that relationship. They know what you want, and then they're able to know exactly what to do to help sponsor you, because it's about having the right conversations at the right time with the right people. So they've got the access, but we've got to really be clear on what it is that we want. Because if they don't know, that sponsorship is a little bit it's challenging for others to know what to do.
You're so right. And again, that goes back to why that infrastructure is so important. That infrastructure includes not only creating those pairs where you have someone who's needing to be sponsored and you having that sponsor, but they both know what is their role in this, right? And the outcome that we're trying to create together. I see 2 hands up. I'm going to go there, but I also want to make sure that I'm paying attention to the questions that are being presented in the chat. So I will go there next, and then I'll come back to Alfred and Kwabena. So I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Indira, or maybe Indira, her question is, can you talk a little bit more about how you would coach that white leader who is concerned about being left out. And I think this goes back to one of the comments you made before, where you certainly shared sometimes they feel like, well, I'm left out of this now. What is my role here? So I want to, while we're shifting from the conversation of how oftentimes, white male CEOs or C-suite leaders are challenged by the coaching opportunity, I think this is a great segue into Indira's question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's going back to, one, you want to create a psychologically safe space. So there, to really make sure that people understand there is no judgment, to feel comfortable to saying whatever is coming up. And I think about, in coaching, so there's always underlying themes. If there's frustration, what's underneath the frustration? If there's anger, right? Frustration, whatever that might be, it's typically hurt or fear. So we go straight in to, what is this really about? And so let's actually dig in a little bit deeper. And, some of the things that people have shared with me as far as the fear aspect is, what's going to happen in my career? Do I still have a place in this organization? And the one that I know I've been talking to a lot of my friends, including, my soul sister on this call, is I've had senior white male leaders actually tell me that, what, I'm not worried about myself. I'm worried about opportunities for my kids in the future when we're going to be a much more demographically diverse, just country. What's going to happen to opportunities for my kids? And there's no judgment there. It's listening, and it's real talk, right? And real conversations that are important. And it's opening up a space to, let's actually have those real conversations. So I think when you're able to dig in a little bit deeper of what the fear is, and then especially tying it back to, the what we were talking about before about organizations and diversifying the leadership pipeline, if you're tying it to organizational values, it actually helps people understand why we're doing this. And then I go deeper into, like, are you afraid that something's being taken away and something's being given to someone else? So you look at the pie, right? Sometimes we think there's only 8, like pie, pizza, whatever, 8 slices of pizza, and that's it. So there's nothing else for anyone else. Well, we don't have to look at things that way. We can have many pies, we can have many slices of pizza. And so I think when we get to this place of realizing that an opportunity for me doesn't mean that you're losing out on an opportunity. We can all actually have access to more opportunities. We can all be successful together. And the key from this for me is that we're all in this together. My success is your success. Your success is my success. So how can we all do this together?
Yeah, it's not a zero-sum game, the scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset. So very, very good. I'm going to try to squeeze a couple more questions in. And so, Alfred, your hand has been up for a while. I'll go to you, and then hopefully we'll have time, Debbie, for you to close this out with your final question.
Real quick, it's almost by default, especially in larger organizations, that there's going to be a BIPOC, someone who's a non-BIPOC individual, who's a sponsor, a mentor, or a coach.
Yeah.
And so my question is, how can you help us frame how we go into it, our mindsets, our behaviors, our attitudes, when power is involved, and then when we sometimes get a little bit subservient in our role, and the homework that we should be doing to form an agreement, take ownership of the process, and also to give them homework or constantly be an active sponsee or mentee, etc. That would be my question.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Elonda or Anu, whoever's going to take this question, to please kind of reframe his question or to repeat it. The audio was a little low, and I want to make sure we all have the benefit of knowing what his question was.
You want to jump in?
Rock, paper, scissors?
So I'll reframe. So what I heard you say, Alfred, is that there are a couple of different aspects to your question. So I'll say, like, as the coachee, mentee, or sponsoree, how do you ensure that you are showing up in a way that is authentic, and mindful of the different power dynamics at play? And then on the other side, for the sponsor, mentor, and or coach, what do we suggest for those individuals in preparing to really hold the space effectively for that individual? Was that good? Yeah. Okay. All right. So one thing that Anu and I are both really passionate about is supporting other coaches and leaders and sponsors and holding spaces for diverse clients. It really requires, even as a credentialed coaches, that we do our own work and come into that space with an open mind and ready to listen to understand and not necessarily to respond, and that we are really checking our biases along the way. It is hard. I will just admit that it's very challenging to do, and it's part of like being practice, and and also being vulnerable and authentic with the person, and expressing that what your role is. So basically, you don't want to take on more than you're equipped to take on, and more than you're capable of when you're showing up in that capacity. And then on the other side, I think it's a similar answer about doing your own work, but I think it's important to call out when those power dynamics exist, and that makes it, that might make you a little bit uncomfortable. And when you're setting agreements at the beginning of that relationship, whether it's coaching or whether it's a sponsorship relationship, then you align on the fact that we're here showing up as two people in these capacities in this moment. And I recognize you may be my supervisor, or you may be a leader in this organization. And today you're here to support me in this capacity. So it's really just acknowledging that. And making it part of your agreement that when you feel like bias is creeping in, or those power dynamics are creeping in, that you'll pause and that you'll be able to call it out. But it requires having a safe environment, which we can go into on another call, like how to foster that. But that's really critical.
It was such a good response. I love that "and" in there, that "and." This is the case, and this is also something I don't want to be missed. I think that's really critical. We are out of time, and I would love for us to invite you both back, because this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for being here. I'm telling you that secretly I'm like claiming you both as a soul sister, because I just want it to be, right? But I do hope that you all continue to find value in being connected with Elonda and Anu, because they have great intel, great insight. And I hope that you also will share this podcast experience with others that you feel like would gain value by the replay or catching it on podcast. Safe and happy weekend to each one of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you again next week on Intentional Conversations VodCast. Thanks so much, you all. Bye-bye.